I would like to dedicate this video to all my brothers and sisters who are married. I hope you'll find the story interesting. So enjoy yourselves.
And among his signs is this, that he created for you mates from among yourselves, that you may dwell in tranquility with them, and he has put love and mercy between your hearts. Verily, in that are signs for those who reflect. When I got home that night, as my wife served dinner, I held her hand and said, "I've got something to tell you." She sat down and ate quietly. Again, I observed the hurt in her eyes. Suddenly, I didn't know how to say it, but I had to let her know what I was thinking. "I want a divorce." I raised the topic calmly. She didn't seem to be annoyed by my words. Instead, she asked me softly,
"Why?"
I avoided her question. That night, we didn't talk to each other. She was weeping. I knew she wanted to find out what had happened to our marriage, but I could hardly give her a satisfactory answer. I had lost my heart to a lovely girl called Dew. I didn't love her anymore. I just pitied her. With a deep sense of guilt, I drafted a divorce agreement which stated that she could own our house, 30% shares of my company, and the car. She glanced at it and then tore it to pieces. The woman who had spent 10 years of her life with me had become a stranger. I felt sorry for her wasted time, resources, and energy. But I could not take back what I had said, for I loved Dew so dearly. Finally, she cried loud in front of me, which was what I had expected to see. To me, her cry was actually a kind of release. The idea of divorce, which had obsessed me for several weeks, seemed to be firmer and clearer now. The next day, I came back home very late and found her writing something at the table. I didn't have supper, but went straight to sleep and fell fast asleep because I was tired after an eventful day with Dew. When I woke up, she was still there at the table, writing. I just didn't care, so I turned over and was asleep again. In the morning, she presented her divorce conditions. She didn't want anything from me, but needed a month's notice before the divorce. She requested that in that 1 month, we both struggle to live as normal a life as possible. Her reasons were simple. Our son had his exams in a month's time, and she didn't want to disrupt him with our broken marriage. This was agreeable to me, but she had something more. She asked me to recall how I had carried her into bridal room on our wedding day. She requested that every day for the month's duration, I carry her out of our bedroom to the front door every morning. I thought she was going crazy. Just to make our last days together bearable, I accepted her odd request. I told Dew about my wife's divorce conditions. She laughed loudly and thought it was absurd.
No matter what trick she has to face the divorce,
she said scornfully. My wife and I hadn't had any body contact since my divorce intention was explicitly expressed. So when I carried her out on the first day, we both appeared clumsy. Our son clapped behind us.
Daddy's holding Mommy in his arms.
His words brought me a sense of pain. from the bedroom to the sitting room, then to the door. I walked over 10 meters with her in my arms. She closed her eyes and said softly,
"Don't tell our son about the divorce."
I nodded, feeling somewhat upset. I put her down outside the door. She went to wait for the bus to work. I drove alone to the office. On the second day, both of us acted much more easily. She leaned on my chest. I could smell the fragrance of her blouse. I realized that I hadn't looked at this woman carefully for a long time. I realized she wasn't young anymore. There were fine wrinkles on her face. Her hair was graying. Our marriage had taken its toll on her. For a minute, I wondered what I had done to her. On the fourth day, when I lifted her up, I felt a sense of intimacy returning. This was the woman who had given 10 years of her life to me. On the fifth and sixth day, I realized that our sense of intimacy was growing again. I didn't tell you about this. It became easier to carry her as the months slipped by. Perhaps the everyday workout made me stronger. She was choosing what to wear one morning. She tried on quite a few dresses, but could not find a suitable one. All her dresses have grown bigger. I suddenly realized that she had grown so thin. That was the reason why I could carry her more easily. Suddenly, it hit me. She had buried so much pain and bitterness in her heart. Subconsciously, I reached out and touched her head. Our son came in at that moment and said,
"Dad, it's time to carry Mom out."
To him, seeing his father carrying his mother out had become an essential part of his life. My wife gestured to her son to come close and hugged him tightly. I turned my face away because I was afraid that I might change my mind at this last minute. I then held her in my arms, walking from the bedroom through the sitting room to the hallway. Her hand surrounded my neck softly and naturally. I held her body tightly. It was just like our wedding day, but her much lighter weight made me sad. On the last day, when I held her in my arms, I could hardly move a step. Our son had gone to school. I held her tightly and said I hadn't noticed that our life lacked intimacy. I drove to office, jumped out of the car swiftly without locking the door. I was afraid any delay would make me change my mind. I walked upstairs. Dew opened the door and I said to her, "Sorry, Dew, I do not want the divorce anymore." She looked at me, astonished, then touched my forehead.
Do you have a fever?
She said. I moved her hand off my head. "Sorry, Dew," I said. "I want divorce." My marriage life was boring, probably because she and I didn't value the details of our lives, not because we didn't love each other anymore. Now I realized that since I carried her into my home on our wedding day, I am supposed to hold her until one of us departs this world. Dew seemed to suddenly wake up. She gave me a loud slap and then slammed the door and burst into tears. I walked downstairs and drove away. At the floral shop on the way, I ordered a bunch of flowers for my wife. The sales girl asked me,
"What should I write in the card, sir?"
I smiled and wrote, "I'll carry you out every morning until we are old."
There are times when we must be hurt in order to grow. We must lose in order to gain, because some lessons in life are best learned through pain. The small details of our lives are what really matter in a relationship. It is not the mansion, the car, the property, or the bank balance that matters. These create an environment conducive for happiness, but cannot give happiness in themselves. So find the time to be your spouse's friend and do those little things for each other that build a relationship.